Desiree from Verve and Ask the Planner podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell me all about you. How'd you get into wedding planning?
So I kind of had a circuitous route like many people in the industry. I started in PR right after college, and then I had a kind of Devil Wears Prada moment, and I was like, I'm not happy. Yeah. So I said, what did I do before this? Mm-hmm. And I remember that I did a lot of events in high school and college. I was always, prom committee. I did our activities board. So I just fell back to that. And then I started in events doing an annual meeting for 7,000 political scientists. And that really got my organizational mind going. And then I moved from there to galas. And then basically I was in galas and special events for a long time. Fast forward about 9 years, and we had a baby, and we moved from Washington, D.C. to upstate New York, and I had another baby, and I was like, I had 2 years off, and I missed using that part of my brain. And I said, I had 6 hours of sleep, and I was like, I am ready to start a company now. Let's do this. And that's basically how it started. I missed working in events. I had clients, and I just wanted to get back into working and using that part of my brain. And, I always loved weddings. During prom, I would always have like the Martha Stewart magazine, and I would always look at dresses, and it was just always so much fun. So that's how we got started.
It sounds like it's something that came naturally to you.
It did. I always liked being creative, and that's why I moved from meetings to galas and fundraisers, because you were able to do more decor and more aesthetics. But really, the wedding industry is a melding of both of all of my strengths, which is being super type A, mm-hmm. being really creative, and I like to tell people what to do.
I love it. And so Verve is a wedding planning company. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what a wedding planner does for all those who don't know.
I love this question because I think there's people don't know what wedding planners do. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, you're like J-Lo in the movie," and we're like, "No, not really."
I loved that movie.
So wedding planners, the thing that I think that's kind of challenging about wedding planning in general is that there's no licensing. There's no overarching board that says this is what you have to do as a wedding planner. So anyone can make it their own. There's a low barrier to entry. To me, as a full service wedding planner, we help the client throughout the whole entire life cycle from beginning to end. So we help them source their venue, all of their vendors, do the creative design of everything, and then we help with the execution. We are kind of like a GC when it comes to building your house. We're directing all of your vendors. We're looking over contracts, managing your budget, all of those things. With that said, not everybody does that. Some people focus on day of, which I think is kind of a misnomer in the industry, because if you're literally hiring someone to just walk in on your wedding day and execute the plans that you magically that you dreamed up for 13 months, it's going to be challenging for them. So you really need someone that at least has been involved for the last 3 months, I think at minimum, to really get a feel for everything that you have planned. With that said, some people focus on just the logistics. Some people focus on just the design. We do everything because I think it's one giant jigsaw puzzle to really make sure that everything is cohesive and moving in the right direction. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
So where do you start? Do you start with budget or do you start with vision?
I think it's both. So I like to focus on the budget just because even if your budget is $50,000, $500,000, $2 million, there's always some kind of constraint around what you want to plan. Right. So I start with that. But then I also like to think of what are your priorities as a couple, as a client? What are you really, really excited for? Because that's going to really inform the whole vision of the day, the experience that you want to create, and then we'll go from there. So I like to work backwards where, okay, we have X number of dollars. How are we going to prioritize everything? How is everything going to be divided up or allocated? And then we'll go from there when we're selecting your venue, your vendors, all of that stuff.
How do you know if a couple is a good match based off of their interactions during the wedding planning process?
It's interesting because I see more couples these days where both people are involved.
Sure.
Sometimes it's hard because we're working together for 13 months, 2 years even, and sometimes one partner gets more involved as the planning progresses, or they're just not as available. So those are kind of hard to tell. I think it's really important to see them on the wedding day and see how they interact and see how they act as a team. And if there is a give and take, or if it's like, no, I think when you get further on in your relationship, I've been married for 15 years, at some point people are going to have an opinion. So really being able to value each other's contributions and what they bring to the table is super important. And I think when I see that back and forth and that camaraderie and that teamwork, then I really feel like they're going to be so great. I just can't wait to see like what the rest of their life is. If they're not super involved and they're just kind of showing up, then it makes me pause and think, how is this person going to show up for the rest of the marriage?
Yeah, how invested are they really?
Right, exactly.
You've seen it all, Desiree. How should budget be allocated for a wedding? Like, is it X amount for flowers? Is it a certain percentage on the decor?
I love this question because I think, if you go to certain websites that are, very popular in our industry, they'll say like your budget for food and beverage is going to be 50% and your budget for flowers is going to be X percent. I really feel like your budget is a reflection of your priorities. Mm-hmm. So if photography is super high on your priority list, it's going to be more expensive than what a typical person is going to be spending because it's important to you. If stationery, for example, is not high on your priority list, then it's going to take up less in your budget. Food and beverage, those costs that are going to be per person are going to be more expensive just because of the nature of the event. So when your guests come, they are consuming the alcohol, they are consuming the food. Those per person costs add up. Whereas photography is going to be more stable. It's not going to change with your guest count. It's really going to depend on hours that you have them. Yeah. But those per person costs are going to add up and will be a significant chunk of your budget, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So everybody has an opinion in the wedding planning process. And I think especially so if you have future in-laws or parents that are providing financial assistance for this event. How should people handle that?
The in-laws. So let's go to the budget first. Yeah. I think a lot of couples are fortunate to be able to have parents or other stakeholders, as we call them, that are helping them and investing in their wedding. I think it's really important, which I know is really hard, but to have those conversations up front to discuss, are there any stipulations or requirements if you are contributing to the wedding? A lot of times I see it where the parents are like, we have X amount to spend. We really just want the kids to have fun and have what they want. Great. And that's, I think,
no strings attached.
Right. Like that's very ideal because I think, when you start to put stipulations or caveats, it's really hard because their priorities might not be the same as yours. But to that end, you still have to take into consideration if you are willing to accept this money, you have to know that there might be some requirements involved, but I think it's important to know those up front.
They're adding their friends to the guest list.
Exactly. And then I think also having that conversation, okay, if you add these people, it's going to cost X amount per person. Is that person worth it to you? Yeah. It might be, it might not be.
Yeah. So how should couples decide on what the guest list look like? And this I've seen so many friends get married where like a husband wants to invite all of his college buddies that he hasn't seen in like 15 years and, mother wants to invite all of her friends. How do you do this?
The guest list is definitely one of the most fraught conversations I think people have because it is a sticking point. There are definitely budget implications. Just like with the budget conversation, have that conversation up front. So if it's dependent on the venue, for example, some venues only have space for X amount of guests. That means that you may not be able to invite your cousin from, twice removed or whatever. So I think really having that conversation in the beginning with parents, with your partner, okay, here is our list of everybody, and then kind of put it into tiers of these are the most important people that we have to have, and these are the people that we would like to have, and then have a conversation with your planner or amongst each other. Okay, if we have this many people, what does that mean for our budget? Because I hate to bring it back to budget, but a lot of times it really is going to be when people see the numbers attached to all the people that they want to invite, then they're like, okay, maybe we don't need to have that person because I haven't seen them in 15 years. And, a lot of times when couples are trying to decide, should I invite this person? Should I not invite this person? I like to say if you haven't had dinner with them or wouldn't go to dinner with them in a year, 2 years, then you might be fine not inviting them, because it should be the people that you want to see, and that it would be awkward if you didn't invite them. If you haven't seen them in a couple years and it's not going to matter if you didn't invite them, they're probably going to be fine. I know there's some drama involved, and some parents are like, it's going to be a problem if you don't invite this person. But I think having those conversations is really, really important. In addition to that, I also want to say that having a kind of a rule where I'm only going to invite up to X line in our family. So I'm going to invite up to my first cousins, but not their kids. And you're going to invite your first cousins and their kids, because everyone's families and their dynamics are different. So what is going to be good for my family and my relationships might be different from my partner's family. So I think having a consistent rule for each side is important, but then also sticking to that rule and being okay with it. I think the problem and the drama arises when people make exceptions to the rule. When you have exceptions to the rule, then people are like, well, so-and-so was invited. Why weren't we invited? You know, so you have to be able to back yourself up and feel comfortable saying, no, this is why we did it, and we're going to stick to it. And then I think people will hopefully be able to back off.
Well, on that note, what do you do about plus ones? We all have that friend who just started dating this guy and she wants to bring him. Like, what do you do?
I think it's the same for a plus one. Plus ones, I think it's always nice, as a host, you want to make sure that your guests feel comfortable. So I think it is important to think, if this person doesn't know anybody else and they're not going to have anyone else to be able to talk to, you want to take that into consideration, because they're traveling, they're spending money to be with you, to celebrate you and your wedding day. On the flip side, if you haven't met that person, you don't have space either in your budget or in the room and the floor plan in general, I think having that conversation with that person is important too. Thinking about the relationships that you have with this person, I think, is very, very important, and how that's going to be seen in the future down the road.
What about for destination weddings? Is there certain etiquette that you should be following?
For plus ones?
For plus ones or kids?
I think everyone's situation is different. I think a lot of people end up having destination weddings because they do want it to be more intimate, and that kind of already helps cut down the guest list in general. So if that's your goal, great. Communication, I think, is super important. So I think if you are trying to keep it intimate, trying to keep it small, you don't want the kids to come, have that on the website, and always put it, though, in a positive light. Say, we're super excited to spend time with you. We want this to be a vacation. We want you to be able to be focused on the experience. Please leave the kids at home. You utilize this time to, have fun as parents, have fun not as parents but as yourselves, and really enjoy that. And I think when you keep it on the more positive light, people are going to receive it in a different way, as opposed to saying no kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all about the framing.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about time frames? When should you be booking your venue? When should you be booking your vendors? When should you be sending out the guest list?
So I am still in kind of a hoarding mentality left over from the pandemic. So and as a planner, I like to get things done as far out as possible, with the caveat that sometimes there is too much time to plan a wedding. So it's fall of 2024 now, and we're getting inquiries for 2026.
Wow.
I know.
That is really far in advance.
I'm a planner. I'm like, great. However, so much can change in the industry in 2 years. So much can change in your relationship, in your priorities, in your tastes in 2 years. So I typically see, as far as booking a planner and a venue, that's in like the 13, 14-month time frame at most. I really wouldn't go further out than that.
What's the average between like when people get engaged and when they get married? Like, how long are people spending planning weddings? I always thought it was a year.
Yeah, statistically, it's still about 13 months.
Okay.
And I think that's typically normal. But, we have planned weddings in 9 months and 8 months, and it's fine. Obviously, you have a planner. So the nice thing when you have a planner is that you are able – I have a lot of vendors on my speed dial. I can get information and facts really, really quickly. And I think that kind of puts us at the beginning of the line, which is really, really helpful. But also, I think trying to book hair and makeup, a venue before their books have even opened is going to be really challenging. So there is, I think, a sweet spot of around 12 to 13 months for your venue, your prime vendors like photo, video, catering, etc., even hair and makeup. But I think even the 8 to 9 month 7-month time frame is still okay. You might just need to have some flexibility in the vendors that you have, perhaps the budget. Sometimes the more expensive vendors are going to be more available because they don't take 50 different weddings a year. They take 10, so they might have more availability than others. On the flip side, if they're a really sought after person, it might be harder, and you might again have to have flexibility going to a Sunday or a Thursday, etc., because of their schedule. And I've seen that too, where couples are like, I really want this planner, or I really want this photographer, so we're going to work around their schedule so that we have the team that we really want.
Okay, let's talk about my favorite part, the dress.
Oh my God.
How far in advance should brides be looking for a dress?
With the dress, I actually would do further out. I would start looking around 12 to 14 months if you can. Yeah. Dresses and the fashion industry is a lot of these dresses are handmade, so it takes a long time for this dress to be made. It doesn't mean that you can't get a custom-made dress with fewer months, but for the whole alteration process, it takes 3 months to get it done. And the thing with fashion, these seamstresses are getting fewer and further between every year. Yeah. And I was just at Kleinfeld's a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how sewing is a dying art form. Tailor's dying art form. Yeah. So getting your dress altered and finding someone that can still do that kind of work it's going to be more challenging in the future. So that's the one that I'd be like, do it sooner rather than later.
Give yourself time.
Right, because it's just there, it's harder to find people that are really good craftsmen in that trade because nobody wants to do it anymore. It's really hard, and it's very slow work. Yeah. So it's not as rewarding, I think, for people in our generation to have a career in. But it's definitely something that's very beautiful, but it's a dying breed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's talk about tipping for a minute. Do you tip all your vendors? Do you tip some of your vendors? How much do you tip them? I feel like this is a black box for most couples getting married.
Yeah, it's definitely one that people don't think about.
Yeah. There's no rule book.
No, there isn't. And so I always tell couples tipping is discretionary. Tipping is for service earned. It's from people who go above and beyond. With that said, your vendors are probably, a lot of them are small, family-owned businesses. They're pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into your day. You don't see it because they're working in the back, behind the scenes. So I always tell people it's discretionary. If you feel like people went above and beyond, go ahead and give them a tip. As far as how much to tip, it really depends. I do see people tipping florists, caterers. A lot of times it's for like their banquet staff, the catering staff, and the wait staff. Okay. We'll do that. Hairstylists. A lot of times hair and makeup will have the tip already included as part of the service. So for hair and makeup, transportation even, make sure that there's not a line already set aside in your bill for that. I'm trying to think who else. Photo and video, people still tip them because it's like one person, it's two people, and they're very, very thankful for the time that they're spending with them. A lot of times you're spending, you develop a relationship with these people, and so you want them to succeed. You want to say thank you. So as far as amounts, I've seen several $100s. I've seen $1,000. It really, really. I've seen people who have giant budgets that don't do anything. Yeah. So with vendors, I always tell them, please check out with me before you leave. I always get annoyed. So vendors, if anyone's listening, make sure you say goodbye to your planner because I might have an envelope for you. Yeah. And then I always will tell them that, for my couples, if they're just like, I just don't know what to give, I'll say, this person, like for floral, it's, usually it's like around 20% depending on the budget. Same thing for photo and video. Yeah. For planners, I see a broad spectrum. It's a couple $100s. It's more than that. Yeah. It really depends on the relationship that you have with them. At the end of the day, I tell them if you don't feel comfortable giving them a tip, I also see gifts. Sometimes it's people are like, I don't want to give a gift because I have no idea who this person is, but I want them to feel like they're thought of and appreciated. So they'll do a gift card. I also see people just doing a really nice thank you. If you don't feel like giving a tip and you're not comfortable with that, write them a review. Send them referrals. Like that is the best way. It is, I've spent 14 months, 2 years working with couples. And then I'm like, can't you just fill out this survey? It takes 5 minutes. Because that's how we get future clients.
Yeah.
And so if you don't feel comfortable doing that, filling out a survey, giving them feedback, writing a review, sending referrals goes so far.
Really
and
important.
We really, really appreciate it. Like almost more than the tip. Because the money, a lot of these vendors aren't in it for the money. It's really because we love what we do.
It's a labor of love.
Exactly. And then we also have staff. So, if we're able to, give a little bit to the staff, we're always happy to do that too.
And who's actually doing the tipping? Because I remember at my wedding, my mom was running around with these envelopes of cash. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know how this is supposed to work, but it felt like weird.
Right, exactly. So I always tell couples, I will see you at the ceremony rehearsal. If you would like to give any tips, please give them to me. Put them in separate envelopes, and they're labeled with each vendor. I will take them. I will have them on my person or in my purse. I don't tell, now I'm like telling people like I got all this cash on me. So I have a safe place for the tips, and then I distribute those on the day of the wedding. I don't give them out until the end. Again, if you're a vendor, please listen, check out with me before you leave. But I'll give those out for my couples because I don't want them to be worrying about that because they're like, then they're like, I'm dancing on the dance floor. Oh, wait, I have to go find the photographer before she leaves. Right. So I take care of that for them. And then I have my little production book, and then I make them sign that they actually received it. Whether it's an envelope or a thank you card, I don't know what it is, but I just tell, can you please sign here that you received this envelope from me? And then they're like, oh, I'm so glad that you do this. And I feel like as an attorney, you're like, this is really smart.
Yeah, exactly. How do you set boundaries with in-laws? And what do you do if tensions arise during the planning process based on their input or their feedback about decisions that you as a couple have already made?
Yeah. It's, I think this is a really great question because this is not something that people talk about a lot, but definitely in-laws, family, your future family is definitely something that you need to be thinking about. And your marriage and your wedding is kind of like the first foray into this. So as far as having in-laws and parents and family involved, try to look at it from the most positive interpretation. So sometimes people are like, my mother-in-law wants to do X, but I don't really want her to do that. How do I handle that? They want to be involved because they want to help you. Like this is a very important time in their life and the relationship with you. So if you can give them something small to do, whether it's planning a shower or helping you with welcome bags, throw them a bone to make them feel involved. A lot of times with my couples, because they have a wedding planner, their in-laws or their parents almost feel like, I don't know what's going on. Is everything okay? And because we're doing so much. And I think that is also a cause for stress for the parents. Yeah. So I always say invite them to our tasting, have them come with us to, to listen to your band or your DJ if you want them to come. Have them join in on those fun things so that they also feel like they're involved. Also, if you're spending their money, say thank you, But I think those kind of milestone moments of the tasting, the cake tasting, coming with you to meetings with the floral, etc. It just helps them feel like you value their opinion, whether or not you take it. It's important. So I think that's one thing. As far as tensions arise or there's disagreements, I think it's important to remember that your relationship with your future in-laws is going to be different from your relationship with your own family. So if you are able to kind of compartmentalize where if there is some tension or disagreement, you work it out with your family, they work it out with their family. This is important because if you are giving perhaps negative feedback or something that your in-laws don't want to hear, it's going to be received differently if you say it than if they were to say it and to deliver it. So you want to make sure you're preserving that relationship you have with your family and your in-laws. If you say something, it's like if I'm having a conversation with my sister or my mom, we always have like a little tip and they're like, we're so sorry, I don't want to fight ever again. It's different. That's our relationship. It's not the same with like my in-laws. So I think having that, and that's something to think about for the future too, as you go further in your marriage. You're not going to agree on everything. When you have kids, when you have a career, that's definitely something that you want to think about as you are evolving in your relationship and in your marriage.
What about cultural differences? Like what if your fiance is from a different culture and there are traditions, and how do you work those in a way that feels really great to your future in-laws, but also, you're excited about.
Exactly. So, there can be tension and stress because sometimes, what is normal to them and expected may not be normal to you. So I think being able to have those conversations, making sure that you're both on the same page, first of all, is super important. So you both need to have that conversation of what's more important to us, what are our priorities, and being
as a couple
exactly. And then being able to stand together in those opinions, and then being able to convey those to parents, family, et cetera, is important. Like I said, when you're having when problems start to arise not in your relationship, like between you and the parents, it's important that you're able to have a united front. As far as incorporating fun traditions, we love doing that. I think it's that's the beauty of America. It's like a melting pot. So like having those fun traditions, whether it's like the dabka dance if you're Lebanese, or the hora, or like a dove release, that makes it fun for your guests. They probably haven't seen it before, or they look forward to it. And a lot of times weddings are a family reunion. So having
it's special.
Exactly, and it makes it different because so many people are like, oh, I've got a wedding to go to. Like it's the same thing over and over again. So like really leaning into those things that are part of your heritage, I think, is super important. But again, having that conversation, because they might not realize, we have to do a money dance. What? Like that's so weird. No, it's super fun. Like having those conversations again with each other, communicating that stuff, so they know that it is a priority, I think is always very important.
And communication is going to be a key theme in a happy and long marriage.
Yes.
So why not start during the wedding planning process?
Exactly.
Speaking of communication, let's talk about bridesmaids. There have been articles in the last couple of years, I know we've all read, about bridesmaids that are just so frustrated with how much they're spending on the bridal party, with how much they're spending on the
bachelorette party.
Yes, with the bachelorette party.
Dresses,
the whole thing. And how should a bride communicate with her soon-to-be bridesmaids about what they're comfortable with so that the process can be fun for all? Because I think that a lot of, and we all know these brides, they tend to dictate. They decide, you're going to wear this dress, we're going to go here, we're going to do this, and you're going to split the bill. And I think that if you're having your bridesmaids split the bill, then you either need to talk to them first about what they're comfortable with, or you should be paying for it. And they're kind of along for the ride and there to have fun. What do you think?
Yeah, so let's go to like the bachelorette party and those kinds of like auxiliary events. When you're putting together your VIP list, I think it's super important to think about the people that you want to surround yourself with on that day. We're seeing smaller and smaller wedding parties because it's a budget implication. Yeah. Two, it's just the energy. Like, what is the energy that you want on that wedding day? Again, going back to the communication, it is super important with your matron of honor, maid of honor, and your wedding party to have those conversations as far as like what you're excited about, not what you expect, because I don't want you to feel like you're entitled to anything. Like, don't forget that these are the girls or guys that have been with you and they are super excited to celebrate you, but they have constraints, whatever it is. So I think having, remembering that they're your friends, you want to preserve the relationship. Would you want to do the same thing for them? So if whatever you're asking them to do, go to Ibiza, go to Napa on a plane, whatever it is, like, would you be able and willing to do that for them if the shoe was on the other foot? So I think that's super important. But yes, like definitely have that communication. I don't think the wedding is a chance for people to feel entitled and be like, oh, now it's my turn and I get to do it. It is, because it's a fun time for you in your relationship, but you have to have some perspective. And I think the couples that are really excited to treat their guests, to create a really monumental experience for them, I think their relationships, because they think about those things, are preserved because they put that time and thought into it. Yeah. As far as hair and makeup, attire, jewelry, etc., I think if you're asking someone if you're directing them how to look, what to wear, what shoe to wear, etc., you should be able to pay for that bill. Yeah. Hair and makeup, I do see sometimes when they're like, oh, well, I'll let them pay for it themselves, and if they don't want to pay, then it's fine. I don't love this.
I've seen people, ask for Venmo requests.
Yeah, and I don't love it when the bride's like, if they want to have hair and makeup done, great. If they don't, also great. The problem with that is like it's going to show in the photos. Like you're going to be able to tell like that person did not have their hair done.
And they're going to feel left out.
Yeah, and I feel it's not a great experience. And again, it goes back to what kind of experience you want to create with these people, the memories that you want to have.
Yeah.
So if you can't afford it, then I would have a smaller wedding party and really just focus on the people that you feel comfortable making those asks of. You feel you would do the same for them, because I think that's where there's the tension or the resentment, because people feel like they're being taken advantage of, and you don't want to do that.
And there's this assumption
exactly
that you have to do this and you'll do it. And I think it causes a lot of rifts in friendships.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and why allow such a special moment in life create a rift in those friendships when you could easily do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Cover it or just don't do it at all.
Yeah. And I having been to so many weddings, I love going to a wedding and being a guest and not being in the wedding party, because honestly, I know sometimes I think like some people are like, I don't want to hurt their feelings, I don't want them to feel bad because they're not in it, etc. And like I think having the conversation with them is important, but I love attending a wedding and being a guest and not having to be in all the photos and just like having fun.
Fun.
Yeah, because you don't have any responsibilities.
How do you choose a wedding party then?
A lot of couples are doing just a sibling. They'll have like, my sister will be my, my person. And then the groom, if you're that kind of couple, will have their, their brother or best man. But sometimes they'll do the flip. And, I've seen a bride have her brother and a groom have his sister.
Nice.
And I think it's, having those, it doesn't mean like you can't hang out with your besties.
I love that too. It makes it fun.
And it's just like, you're just not asking them to spend all the money on all of the clothing and the hair and makeup. You're still there. They're still there to support you. They're still there to like have fun with you.
Yeah.
But, knowing, because I think, people don't talk about money, and that's almost always, that is always the cause of these arguments and the feelings of resentments, because they don't have the conversation about the money. And then again, it goes back to communication.
Yeah. And speaking of money and communication, have you seen any issues with couples during the wedding planning process where maybe they weren't discussing the budget, or one person is going over budget, or anything of that nature?
I don't see it a lot. Maybe people hide it from me. A lot of times I like to talk about the budget in the beginning, and I'll say, okay, I hear that you want X, Y, and Z. I'm going to put together a budget, and then we're going to walk through everything. Now, this budget includes this, this, and this. And then at the end, I'm like, here is our total. I didn't include this, but this does include Y, And then they're like, okay, now I see, maybe we don't want to go that much, super high end on this, or maybe we do. Having those conversations is super, super important. But sometimes, though, couples just don't know until they get into it how much things cost. And so, I think when it goes back to who's contributing, et cetera, having the conversations with your parents, okay, if you feel comfortable giving us X, we will pay for the overage. So if we decide to go over what you want, then we will, we will take care of it, because it is a priority for us, and we know that we've already spent X amount. So I think having those conversations is super important. But I think sometimes, though, like you just don't know until you get into it. But I always tell couples, nothing is set in stone. Like, I will, if you want to explore something radical and crazy or whatever, I'll go find out. I'll go, ask a vendor for pricing.
What is the craziest thing you've ever seen someone request or have at a wedding?
So this is kind of something that I think a lot of, we're on the water a lot. So a lot of our weddings are on the water. They love the look of the antique boat, so it's not like that it's crazy, but people don't realize that a lot of times when you have that beautiful boat photo, that's because the couple knows somebody with a boat. It's hard to just hire a captain to drive you around in this beautiful antique boat, because a lot of times those people do it for fun. They're not licensed to do it. Yeah. And if they are, there's a lot of insurance and requirements, and they have to take a swim test. They have to have like a captain's license. They have like a commercial boating license. So having a lot of couples are like, can we just get a boat? I have tried so hard to find people that have this antique boat. Usually it's just people that have a relationship. So those are, at least where I am, that's usually the hardest. animals, like horses going down Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C., closing off streets and permits. Like that happens. That's a lot of like Indian weddings for the Barat. I don't think it's as an event planner, we just do lots of crazy things. So I feel like I'm not like, oh my God, that's crazy now, because I've just seen so much.
Yeah, you've seen it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Any wedding disaster stories you can share?
Weather is always something that we have to think about.
Can't control it.
Yeah, I would have so much money if I could promise X, a certain kind of weather. So definitely weather is a factor, especially where we are in upstate New York. Rain, I've seen venues getting flooded. And I'm so glad. I mean, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that we know this happens now, because we can plan for it in the future. In the moment, though, it's terrible. And it's as a planner, someone who likes to be in control, it is terrible when you're just like, I did not see that coming, but now it's my job to fix it and make it right, however I can do that. So, one time we were, the weather report was great. Everything looks fine. And we're going out for our vendor meal, and I look out and, oh, there's storm clouds. Great. I guess maybe we're not going to have our sunset photos. And then it starts to pour. And then so I have to run around and be like, okay, we have to gather all the linens, because if the linens get wet, you have to hold on to them. If the linens get wet and you ship them back, they can have mold, all this crazy stuff. Like furniture that's outside, like lounge furniture, you have to move that inside. And a lot of times the vendors are gone. Like the linen company is not there, so it's my team and I that are having to deal with that kind of stuff. So weather's something that's terrible. Going along with the weather, I had with this venue that we're often at, they have a tent. It's like a semi-permanent tent. The Monday before the wedding, a hurricane/tornado came through, ripped the top of the tent off the frame. And she sends me a photo of it on Tuesday, and I know her, and she was like, well, look what happened. And literally the whole top of the tent was gone. And I was like, are you okay? Are you drinking right now? Because it's like, do you need a drink?
You might need
to come help you? She was like, no, it's fine. This has happened before. Luckily, it was a Tuesday, and the tent company came, took the tent. The wedding was on Saturday. Wow. They came, they took the tent. I don't know if they replaced it or just sent a new one, if they like sewed it up. But Friday, they came back in, put a new top on, and the bride did not even know. Like Saturday, gorgeous sunny weather. She had no idea. And these are just the things that we have to. Now, that's not as normal, but stuff like that. Like I had a videographer that canceled on me the Tuesday or the Wednesday before the wedding, and it was on Saturday, and I was like, great. Okay, I can't dwell on the problem. I have to figure out how I'm going to fix it. And I can't go to my couple and say, hey, this happened. Sorry. I can't do that. So, within an hour, I had 3 options lined up for them. But this is because we have relationships. We have people that we can call on. That's part of the reason why you hire a planner, is because they have people. I haven't had that happen to me before, but I'm focused on providing solutions to my couples, so that when I come to them with a problem, I'm also like, this is what we're going to do about it. And they were fine.
So for all those couples who may not have the budget for a full scope wedding planning, what can they do?
If you don't have a budget for a full service planner, that's totally fine. I think there is a planner out there for most people. Talk to planners that do month of coordination, vet them, make sure that they're professionals. Like I said, there is a low barrier of entry to this industry. There are people that are really, really great. So know that a lot of times you get what you pay for, but having someone that can step in and take care of that stuff for you, not to be cheesy, is really priceless. Yeah. Like I really want our couples to be able to be present in the moment, to have fun, for their parents not to be worrying about, oh, the cake is late, like what, whatever it is. Yeah. I really, that time with your family and your friends is so special. So really having someone, whether it's a friend or someone that's wanting to get into the industry, having someone that's there for you to kind of help you with that, I think is really important. But also know that they might not have the experience, and if you're paying them less, know that it's because they don't have the experience, but you want someone that can help take care of that day. If you are hiring, asking a friend to do this, make sure that they're the right fit. Some people may not be a good fit for wedding planning because it is a high stress position. You have to have, you can't flip out on the caterer. You have to be able to command a team. You have to be able to have grace under pressure. So you don't want to set up your friend for failure if they're not the right person to do that job.
And what if you're just doing it yourself?
If you're doing it yourself, there are a lot of blogs, there's podcasts. I have a lot of people that listen to the podcast and they're like, I had no idea any of this was possible or even like within the realm of possibility. Education is super important. There's so much information online. So, I think having, sometimes couples, I think, will oversimplify wedding planning. They're like, oh, like we booked the venue, we booked our vendors. I think we did all the hard stuff. Yeah. And it is hard to them because they don't know what they don't know. Yeah. So if you are doing it yourself, make sure you're organized. Try to think through, what your priorities are. Because I think a lot of times couples kind of get overwhelmed with everything. There's so much, there is a lot of information overload out there too. So I think if you can figure out what your priorities are, what your goals are, having that conversation with your partner ahead of time so that you are able to kind of cut out that noise. And I think we're kind of going off on a tangent, but so you're able to cut out that noise. And remember, does this centerpiece reflect, what you envisioned for the your guests aren't going to know the choices that you guys had in front of you. So if you can go back to like, does this help us meet those goals that we had? Does this line up with those 3 words that we chose that we want to use to describe and how we were going to remember our day? If it doesn't, you can let go of it. There are people that have much more simple weddings, but they're happy because it's what they wanted. I think, we contribute to it. Like there is a lot of information out there. There is a lot that you can do with your wedding.
Pinterest is a rabbit hole.
Stay off Pinterest. Stay off Instagram. Stop scrolling, honestly, because I think there's a lot of comparison that people fall into. And, there's lots of, there's big publications out there that are like, the average wedding costs X. Nobody's putting out the average wedding on their portfolio. Like that is, so, they're,
where are they getting that information?
Like it's middle America. It's the average. So you have, it's not the median. It's, it's not people that are in New York City that have $2 million for a wedding. It's not also people that are in Oklahoma. Love my people in Oklahoma. But, it's completely different. So I think going back to what is a priority for you and what's going to make you happy will help you kind of cut out a lot of that fluff.
And I think communication with your partner when you're in this planning process, especially if you're doing it yourself, is really important because you need to be able to split up the work. So if you're doing it yourselves, you need to be deciding who's the one who's in charge of the contracts, who's the one in charge of sending out the checks, who's the one in charge of finding the day of planner or month of planner. And it can become very overwhelming. I think a lot of women tend to assume the responsibility and they just say, these are the flowers I want, this is the aesthetic I want, and without much input. And I think it's important as a couple to sit down and really have that conversation. So when you're talking about what you should be spending if you're doing it all yourselves, like what is the average price of flowers or the average price of a band?
That is a great question. And it's a hard one to answer because it really depends on a lot of things in the wedding. So it depends on geography. It depends on, the part of the country where you're planning. Again, Kansas is going to be different from LA, from Miami. So that's something to consider. Also, the type and style of the wedding that you're going to have. Is it going to be a backyard wedding that's going to be low key and cash? Or are you going to do something at like the plaza and you have a giant ballroom that you want to decorate with like super tall ceilings? So that's a hard question. I love saying, if you go to the website, The Wedding Report, I think it's a wedding.report. We can link to it in the show notes. There's a fun feature that they have where you can type in a zip code and it will tell you what the average cost of a wedding is in that zip code, in that metropolitan area, et cetera. But remember, again, that is just an average. Like I said, like I don't put out my average weddings. I only put out the weddings that we're proud of and the ones that we want to continue to attract. So having that in mind, I feel like people are like, I think $50,000 is a great wedding. I think $150,000 is a great. It really just depends on people's financial situation and what's right for them. So it's hard for me to say, I feel like I know what a nice wedding costs, but there's people would be like, oh my God, that's like a down payment on a house, so it all depends.
Okay, so what tips do you have for couples who are planning a wedding on a budget?
So, I think a lot of times people's eyes are bigger than their wallets. With that said, I think it's really important to, again, have priorities. So talk with your partner about what you guys are super excited about. I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse or whatever it is, whatever that idiom is. But I think really thinking through, what are your must-have photos? Are you really excited about that ceremony photo? Are you really excited about the tables? Are you really excited about like a super fun escort card installation? Whatever it is. Think through the day. What are those photos that you want to take from your wedding and you want to look back on and have, and how you're going to remember that wedding, and then kind of work backwards from there. With that being said, I think making sure that you're prioritizing your money and putting it towards, again, those priority, like those big moments, those photos that you really want to have, that's where you're going to put your money. Don't spend it on everything, because everything is a priority. Like your flowers, food, wine, entertainment, like everything is a priority at some point. And, and that's hard to do. So I think thinking through like what is really important for you is important. But then also having those specific things, again, as like your guiding moments and putting your money towards that is really important. In addition, I also think it's important to have a cohesive overall look to your wedding. Again, with Pinterest and Instagram, there is so much #inspo out there that people want to add this and add this and like, oh, we have to do this. Like, I see this trending a lot.
Personalized napkins.
Yes, like all of the things. I think like as a planner, we map out our couple's aesthetic and their design at the beginning. We go through, we select all their vendors, and now we're like, okay, now we're going to do the design. Yeah. Tell me everything. And then we map out like the little vignettes of the weekend so that there is a cohesive plan and that we know, okay, this is our plan for escort card. This is our plan for, this is our inspiration for whatever. And then we kind of go from there, and then we select our vendors. Then we select the linens. But we have this master overarching plan, again, like with those words, that visually tells us this is what we're going to do. That's also helpful because then it's not that we have tunnel vision, but we have focus. Yeah. And again, everything is cohesive. We're not adding these failed Pinterest projects at the last minute because like you forgot that you did all these other things because you just keep adding. Yeah. When you keep adding, you're going to, it's going to look kind of messy because it's like you just kept throwing and adding things and you're like, did I really need that? I really, everything feels super important when you're in the moment. But then at the end, you're just like, why did I even do that? So I think having a plan and then sticking to it and then remembering that those are your priorities is super important.
So what if you have different tastes than your partner?
So I wouldn't say that we see this a lot, but I think it's kind of like when you are, moving in together and you have like a hodgepodge of things in your home and you're like, I hate his couch. Like we're getting rid of it as soon as possible. So I think it is important, for your wedding to be beautiful and cohesive to try to narrow it down. Mm-hmm. I do love leaning into what makes you quirky and different because I think that's what's going to make your wedding more unique and memorable. Yeah. There are so many weddings that are like white and green, like, it's like the same wedding that you see on Pinterest all the time. I don't love doing that. There is definitely a look that people like, and if that's your look, great. But if you do have different, funky, quirky tastes, I think you should lean into it because that, again, like that's going to make your day different. We have this one couple. And he is like a self-described nerd. He like loves dad shoes. He's like into sneaker culture. He loves like video games. And she's like, I love sunsets and beautiful flowers and all that. So it's a different design for us, but we took elements of both. So we have kind of like some kind of dorkier like motifs and patterns that we're incorporating. It's checkerboard. It's not that dorky, but like that's like, to me, that's an homage to like the retro Vans print. So we're bringing that in, and then we have
fun.
Yeah, and I think like that's the stuff that's gonna make it's having that tension between the two different sides. That makes your wedding unique and interesting.
It's more personal.
Exactly, but you don't want it to have everything. Like you can't do 5 things from him and 5 things from me because then it's gonna look like a hodgepodge of things.
Yeah.
But I think picking and choosing a couple of different things, putting them together, maybe getting a professional designer to help you put them together, will really again make it fun and memorable and also special to you guys.
I've also seen people have featured cocktails, which I think is really sweet. And like it's their favorite cocktail and it's named after them. And it's just a fun way, I think, for the guests to interact with something that the couple likes.
Yeah, we love a signature cocktail. We're also doing a lot of signature mocktails.
Yeah, love it.
Because it's, we want to be responsible. And it's also like, you just get thirsty. You can't down like 5 of whatever, But, mocktails and cocktails are super fun because, again, it's another way to infuse your personality. Yeah. It's refreshing. You can do lots of theme things. We had a couple that is in New York City, and we designed, it wasn't like super urban because we're like, we're up in like upstate New York. So we wanted to make it chic and metropolitan, but also very them, but also, out in nature. And so we brought in the subway and we used like the different subway stops in their table numbers, but it was still chic and pretty.
Fun.
It was super fun. And it was funny because their escort card display, they wanted to incorporate the Metro cards because they're going to be phased out. And they're like, they're going to be vintage one day. Yeah. And so we want to give those away. So we put them in cute little envelopes. And then the groom thought of the heading of the title for the escort card display was "Next Stop Is," or "Your Next Stop Is." And it's cute because it's fun because it brings their personality into it. We love kind of like weaving little Easter eggs of our couples into the design because, again, maybe not all your guests are going to know that that's why you chose it, but it was there. And I think that's what makes your wedding unique and special. And a lot of times people want to say, how can I make my wedding timeless? How can I make my wedding, stand the test of time? To be honest, people are going to know what decade your wedding is from. It's just unavoidable. That's why I think it's really important to pick things that make you happy, that are pulled from your story, so that you're not relying on these trending photos that everybody is doing. Like when I got married 15 years ago, everyone was taking a photo of the shoes. So we got it all in a circle. Oh, yeah. And everyone put their foot in. And I remember those. I know. And it's like, why did we? I don't know why we did. We did that because it was cute. But do I have that hanging up in my house? No, I don't. Yeah. So, I think having to pick and choose between trends and then also what makes you happy, it's funny now, but I think going through the exercise of like, what are those moments that you want to remember from your wedding is going to help keep your, not necessarily timeless, but the wedding that you want. And when you look back on your wedding, you'll still be super happy that you made those choices because they were a reflection of you guys.
You've been married for 15 years. What advice would you have for couples for a long and happy marriage beyond the wedding day?
I'm like a broken record. Communication. No, I'm kidding. Yes, communication I think is super important. But, now that we've been married for 15 years, we have 2 kids, spending time on your relationship, actually dating each other again is super important. And I think, people will say this, people that have had been married for a long time, I think appreciating each person, taking time, my husband and I work a lot and we'll sit down and like watch TV together, but we're still both on our laptops. It's a terrible habit that we have. And I'm trying to phase that out. But I think that just shows that when we go out on a date, have a conversation, not about the kids, and actually just spend time connecting with each other, it kind of refills our bucket because, when we're so focused on our careers or work or life, kids, school, you kind of forget why you're married to this person and you are basically like you have a roommate. And that's not why you got married. You got married because you want to be together. You love this person. You see the rest of your life with this person. So really taking time, again, to invest in your relationship, to reconnect, which I know sounds so cheesy, but like go do things that are different and that are fun and go out on a date. I know I talked to the woman who is the CEO of Honey Fund, and
Sarah.
Yes.
She's amazing.
Yeah, Sarah's great. And couples that travel together are married longer because they're having new experiences and they're put outside their comfort zone. And again, it takes you out of the norm and the everyday, and then you're able to focus again on yourselves and each other. I think is going to make you guys last.
Let's talk about wedding registries. What are people doing these days?
It's interesting because, I was just on a news show and we were talking about wedding registries, and she was saying, the anchor was saying that it's a hot button topic in the newsroom because as a guest, you're like, now they want us to pay for their house and they want us to pay for like IVF, whatever.
Okay.
So
IVF.
Yeah.
On a wedding registry.
It was interesting. Yeah, because she was saying how, I think 1 in 5 couples now are asking for help with their home funds on a wedding registry. So, I polled my audience and I was like, are you guys doing this? Most of them still said we still went the traditional route and we asked for physical items, mixers, whatever. But there were people that said that we are asking for stuff for our honeymoon. We are asking for stuff for milestones. We're asking for stuff for helping us to get out of student loan debt, helping us save up for a mortgage payment, asking, So
I actually like that.
I like it because I feel like it just shows how people are being more financially savvy.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about money. We talk about it on Today, but people in a society just don't talk about money. And so I think being more financially aware is super important.
Definitely.
I also think we talked about this on the news segment, how it's important how you ask for the money. You don't ever want to come off as entitled or that's the only thing that you want. So one of the things that she said was, people are saying envelopes preferred. I think that's terrible.
What does that mean? With cash in them?
Cash. I think it's, instead of asking for a gift, you've put envelopes preferred. And I said, I think that makes you sound entitled.
Yeah.
And that's what you're expecting. And I think if you spend time communicating what that money is going to go towards, it's going to sit much more positively with your guests. There's nothing wrong with asking for something if it's what you want.
Yeah.
I think, but when I was getting married 15 years ago, people were registering for things and then returning them because they would rather have the cash. I'm like, don't do that. Like, that's just annoying. I would hate it to know that I bought you something and then you just returned it.
Yeah.
So I would much rather give you something that I know that you need or that you want, but still say, in lieu of gifts, please contribute to our home fund. Or something that I thought was interesting was one couple said, the average cost of a home in our zip code is $150 per square foot. By giving us $150, you are helping us buy a square, you can buy 2 square feet, whatever it is. But I think putting it in tangible terms for your guests so that they know that this is specifically what the money is going towards. I did this with like our baby registry. I was like, Mike loves these things because he's going to use like the snot sucker. I was like, he's going to use the snot sucker because he's going to whatever, get like this, when our daughter has like a runny nose. But I spent some time putting in little stories of like how we're going to use X gift. And people like reading that stuff. Like the auntie that's gonna go to Macy's or whatever, she wants to know that you're gonna use those towels because you like to entertain. Like having that the connection, the communication. People want to know that stuff. They want to hear that story. I know it's more work, but you're more likely to get it if you put some thought and effort into it.
It's more meaningful that way too. Desiree, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
Thank you so much for having me. This was such an amazing conversation, so I'm super excited. So we are online, mostly on Instagram. So the Ask the Planner podcast. We are on everywhere you can get podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. And if you want more wedding inspiration, you can check us out at Verve Event Co. That's VEREEVENTCO. And I can't wait to connect with you.
This was awesome. Thank you again.